The studio was alive with the usual morning energy, but today it carried a palpable undercurrent of tension. The audience's chatter was louder than normal, a hum of anticipation that suggested they were expecting fireworks. The cameras rolled steadily, glinting under the overhead lights, capturing the polished table, the neatly arranged coffee mugs, and the familiar faces of the co-hosts. Joy Behar leaned forward in her chair, her fingers drumming lightly against a stack of cue cards. Her smile was practiced but sharp, one of those smiles that promised charm and challenge in equal measure. Today's guest was no ordinary interviewee. Scarlett Johansson, one of Hollywood's brightest stars, was about to sit across from her, and the energy in the room reflected the unspoken awareness that this was not going to be an ordinary segment. The audience quieted as the green room door swung open. Scarlett stepped through, graceful and composed, her posture straight and confident. She wore a cream silk blouse and tailored pants, her hair loose around her shoulders, catching the studio lights just so. There was an elegance to her, an effortless presence that commanded attention without demanding it. The audience erupted in applause, cheers echoing across the studio, and some people craned forward, phones at the ready, hoping to capture what promised to be a memorable moment. Scarlett gave a warm smile and a graceful wave, her calm composure a striking contrast to the energy buzzing through the room. Joy rose to greet her, extending her hand with a polished smile. "Scarlett, it is so wonderful to have you here today. You've been all over the place with your recent projects, and we've been waiting a long time for this moment." Scarlett shook her hand, voice steady and poised. "Thank you, Joy. It's great to be here." For a few moments, the conversation flowed smoothly, focusing on Scarlett's upcoming film. She spoke about her character with insight and humor, sharing anecdotes about the challenges and surprises of filming, and the audience laughed along, charmed by her wit and candidness. For a brief stretch, it seemed like any other morning segment, filled with laughter, light teasing, and glimpses of the personable star behind the headlines. Then the topic shifted. Joy's eyes gleamed as she leaned slightly forward, the subtle signal that the segment was about to take a turn. "Scarlett, your recent interviews and public statements have sparked a lot of discussion," she began, her tone polite but probing. "Some people say you've been too careful in navigating Hollywood politics, while others believe you've been pushing boundaries. How do you respond to that?" Scarlett's expression remained calm, but a flicker of intensity crossed her eyes. "I try to be honest in my work and in my public statements," she said evenly. "It's never about stirring controversy. It's about highlighting things that matter and need attention." Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward, her signature energy evident in the sparkle of her eyes. "Honest, huh? That's interesting because some think honesty in Hollywood is a luxury. Some people feel like you say one thing publicly, but then avoid real confrontation behind the scenes. How do you reconcile that?" The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the tension. Scarlett's jaw tightened just slightly, a subtle indication of her awareness that the conversation had escalated. "I do reconcile it," she said, keeping her tone even. "Speaking honestly doesn't always mean being confrontational. Change takes persistence, not spectacle. I'm careful to make sure my words and actions align in meaningful ways." Whoopi's brow arched, eyes narrowing in challenge. "Persistence, huh? That sounds awfully measured. Some would argue Hollywood rewards boldness, not caution. Are you willing to really challenge the system, or do you play it safe?" Scarlett leaned forward, her voice calm but pointed. "Challenging the system doesn't always require a public spectacle. It requires action behind the scenes, careful decisions, and sometimes patience. Real change doesn't come from shouting, it comes from strategy and persistence." Joy Behar interjected, sensing an opportunity to escalate the moment. "But Scarlett, isn't it frustrating when people criticize you for doing exactly what you said you would? Speaking up yet maintaining your career? It seems like a no-win scenario." Scarlett's eyes flicked toward her, unblinking. "It can be," she admitted. "But it's about being effective, not popular. I believe in meaningful progress, not applause or headlines. The work happens quietly and consistently, not just in moments that make the evening news." Whoopi leaned back slightly, her expression a mix of amusement and challenge. That's a very diplomatic answer. But let's be honest here. Sometimes being nice and measured can look like complicity. If you're part of the system and don't rock the boat, how do we know you're really pushing for change? The audience's murmur grew louder, sensing the confrontation. Scarlett's composure did not falter. Her gaze was steady, her tone calm but firm. Being measured isn't the same as being complicit. Change takes time, strategy, and persistence. If every act had to be explosive to count, nothing of value would last. Joy's eyes narrowed slightly, her tone sharpening. So you're saying you can affect real change without ever being dramatic? That's a bold claim, Scarlett. Bold, but can it work in an industry that thrives on drama? Scarlett leaned in, her voice even but carrying a weight that silenced the murmurs in the audience. Yes, because meaningful change comes from understanding, influence, and action, not theatrics. Loud moments might get attention, but they don't create lasting progress. That's why measured, deliberate action is far more powerful than any performance. The tension in the room was thick. The panelists exchanged glances, recognizing the segment had evolved from a friendly interview into a battle of principles. The audience's energy shifted, caught between fascination and suspense, eager to see how Scarlett would handle the probing questions. Whoopi's tone became sharper, her voice carrying across the studio. Or maybe you're just afraid of making waves, Scarlett. Afraid of losing something, fame, influence, access, whatever keeps the Hollywood machine humming in your favor. The words landed like a lightning strike. The audience went silent. Scarlett blinked, caught off guard by the directness of the accusation. For a brief second, her expression betrayed surprise, but she recovered immediately, meeting Whoopi's gaze steadily. "No," she said, her voice quiet but unwavering. "I'm not afraid. I'm measured. There's a difference between acting recklessly and acting effectively. True change requires understanding the system, knowing how to navigate it, and deciding when to act publicly and when to act behind the scenes." A murmur ran through the audience, a mixture of admiration and surprise. Joy Behar leaned forward, sensing the moment had reached its peak. "Scarlett, you can't just answer with a smile and a well-constructed sentence. People want honesty, real, raw honesty. What's your true stance?" Scarlett paused for a fraction of a second, then leaned forward slightly, eyes locking with Whoopi's. "My true stance is that effectiveness matters more than theatrics. I'm not here to perform outrage. I'm here to effect change. And I know that lasting change often happens quietly, through consistent effort and thoughtful action." The audience shifted in their seats. Some leaning backstage, the atmosphere was charged with a mixture of adrenaline, tension, and a peculiar sense of awe. The hum of studio activity was muffled by the thick walls separating the green room from the main set. Yet the echoes of applause and murmured reactions seeped through like distant thunder. Scarlett Johansson sat on a leather couch, her posture upright and composed, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed just how intense the on-air segment had been. She took a slow sip of water, letting the cool liquid calm the lingering rush of adrenaline in her veins. The room smelled faintly of coffee, makeup, and the lingering antiseptic of studio cleanliness, a stark contrast to the roaring energy she had just left behind. Her assistant hovered nearby, clutching a clipboard with the show's schedule and notes, looking slightly frazzled. "Scarlett," she said carefully, "that was something. I mean, you handled it brilliantly, but—" Scarlett interrupted with a small, tight smile. "I know, I expected it to be intense. That's live television. It's part of the game." Her voice was calm, even measured, but there was a faint edge in her tone, the kind that comes from someone who has been tested and has passed. The assistant nodded, still slightly worried. "Whoopi doesn't usually push that hard. She's tough, but she doesn't usually— Well, I've never seen anyone keep her like that off balance." Scarlett leaned back, her fingers steepled thoughtfully. "She's brilliant. That's what made it challenging. She's incisive, fearless, and she knows exactly where to strike. I respect that. You have to respect it if you want to hold your own." A knock sounded at the door, soft but deliberate. Scarlett glanced up. "Come in," she said, her voice steady. Whoopi Goldberg entered, her red blazer catching the dais.